antique mirror arrived at Jenna's doorstep on a rainy afternoon, wrapped in faded burlap and tied with twine that seemed older than her grandmother. She hadn't ordered it, hadn't even heard of the shop listed on the tag. Cursed Curiosities, Maine, was scrawled in elegant script, the ink smudged from the rain. Must be a mistake, Jenna muttered, bending down to inspect the package. But when she glanced up and saw her reflection in the window beside the door, her curiosity outweighed her better judgment. She dragged the package inside, leaving muddy streaks on the polished floor, and pried it open with her keys. The mirror was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Tall and arched, with an intricately carved ebony frame depicting serpents twisting and biting their tails. The glass shimmered with an odd sheen, as though it didn't just reflect light, but consumed it. That night, after hanging the mirror in her bedroom, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She caught herself staring at it, not at her own reflection, but at the way the glass seemed to ripple faintly, like a pond disturbed by an unseen breeze. "You're just tired," she told herself, climbing into bed. The first dream came that night. In it, Jenna stood in an endless field of scorched earth under a blood-red sky. The air buzzed with whispers, low and incomprehensible, like 1,000 voices just out of reach. Then from the haze, a figure emerged, a man with a face too blurred to discern, but his eyes burned like embers. "You invited me in," he said, his voice smooth and cold, as though the words carried frost. Jenna woke with a start, her sheets damp with sweat. The mirror loomed in the darkness, catching the faint glow of her alarm clock. For a second, she thought she saw movement in its glass, her reflection tilting its head while she remained still. She tried to dismiss it as lingering dream imagery, but the unease clung to her like a second skin. Over the next few days, the dreams became more vivid. The man in the haze began to speak more clearly, though his words were riddles she couldn't unravel. Each time she woke, the mirror seemed closer, though it hadn't moved an inch from its place on the wall. "You're looking pale," said her friend Claire one evening as they sat in Jenna's kitchen. "Are you sleeping at all?" Jenna shook her head, her fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of untouched coffee. "It's just this mirror. I think there's something wrong with it." She explained the dreams, the whispers, and the unsettling way her reflection seemed to have a life of its own. Claire laughed nervously. "Sounds like you need to stop watching horror movies before bed." But Jenna's unease deepened that night when, for the first time, the voice in her dreams addressed her by name. "Jenna," it whispered, the sound curling through the scorched field like smoke. "You've already given me what I need." Her reflection smiled. Jenna avoided the mirror the next morning, keeping her eyes fixed anywhere but its glimmering surface. Yet, as she passed it on her way to the bathroom, she couldn't resist a glance. Her reflection stared back, normal at first, but then, in a fleeting moment too fast to trust, her reflection's lips curled into a smirk she hadn't made. "No," she whispered, backing away. "No, it's just stress." By the time she reached the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a call from Claire. "Hey," Claire said, her voice unusually chipper. "So, I was thinking, why don't we sage that creepy mirror of yours? Can't hurt, right?" Jenna hesitated. Part of her wanted to rid herself of the mirror, but another part, a deeper, darker part, felt an odd attachment to it, as if the thought of destroying it was an unbearable betrayal. "Yeah," she said, after a long pause. "Maybe tomorrow." That night, the dreams escalated. She found herself back in the scorched field, the air heavy with sulfur. The figure with amber eyes stood closer now, his features sharpening into a gaunt face, with sunken cheeks and a cruel smile. His voice was velvet and venom. "You don't remember, do you?" he asked. "Remember what?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. The man chuckled, a low and chilling sound. "The mirror isn't just a gift, Jenna. It's an agreement. You opened the door and let me in. And now..." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching impossibly far. "We are bound." She woke screaming, her chest heaving. But the terror didn't subside when she realized her room was not as she left it. The air was icy, her breath visible in the dark. Worse, her mirror now bore a crack running diagonally across the glass. From its fracture seeped a faint black mist that twisted and coiled before vanishing. Panicked, she grabbed her phone and called Claire. "You need to come over. Now." 15 minutes later, Claire arrived, her face pale with concern. "What happened?" she asked, stepping into the living room where Jenna was pacing. Jenna gestured toward the bedroom. "It's the mirror. There's something wrong with it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's alive." Claire hesitated, her gaze flickering to the hallway. "Alive? It's cracked," Jenna said, her voice rising. "And something's coming out of it. I'm not crazy, Claire. You have to believe me." Claire took a deep breath, setting her purse on the coffee table. "Okay," she said. "Show me." Together they entered the bedroom. The mirror stood as ominous as ever, the crack a dark scar across its surface. Claire leaned closer, squinting at the fracture. "Jenna," she said slowly, "this isn't just a crack. It's..." The mist poured out before she could finish, curling around Claire like a serpent. She screamed, clawing at the air as her eyes rolled back. Jenna grabbed her arm, but Claire was yanked toward the mirror with an unnatural force. "Claire!" Jenna shrieked, but her friend's body went limp and collapsed to the floor. From the mirror, the ember-eyed figure emerged halfway, his upper body pressing against the glass as though it were a membrane. His voice was a whisper, but filled the room like thunder. "She's mine now," he said, his gaze locking onto Jenna. "And soon, so will you." Jenna dragged Claire's unconscious body out of the bedroom, her hands trembling as she struggled to catch her breath. The mirror pulsed behind her, its surface shimmering as though it were alive. Jenna locked the door and pressed her back against it, the sound of her heart pounding louder than her thoughts. Claire stirred on the floor, her eyelids fluttering open. "Jenna," she mumbled weakly, her voice strained. "What happened?" "You," Jenna stammered, clutching Claire's shoulders. "The mist, it attacked you. Something pulled you toward the mirror." Claire's expression darkened. I saw something." She sat up slowly, her hand clutching her chest. "There was a man. His face, God, Jenna, he was inside my head, whispering things." "What did he say?" Jenna demanded. Claire hesitated, her eyes darting toward the locked door. "He said you invited him in, that it's too late to stop him now. He called you the vessel." Jenna's stomach churned. "That's not true. I didn't..." Her voice caught in her throat. as memories from weeks ago surfaced. The late-night browsing on strange antique websites, the curiosity that led her to a page titled Bound Reflections, Mirrors of Power. She had thought it was a joke, a bit of harmless fun when she clicked accepted to the cryptic terms and conditions. Claire gripped Jenna's arm tightly. "We have to destroy it." "I tried," Jenna whispered. "The crack appeared after my dreams started, but it didn't stop anything. It made it worse." Claire stood shakily, her resolve hardening. "Then we need help. Someone who knows what this is." Jenna nodded, though the weight of guilt pressed down on her chest. Together they scoured the internet, their frantic search eventually leading them to a local occultist named Marla, whose small shop was filled with grimoires, talismans, and an air of unshakable authority. "You're dealing with a summoning mirror," Marla said after Jenna finished explaining. She was a sharp-eyed woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, her hands adorned with rings that jingled as she gestured. "It's not just an object, it's a doorway. And from what you've described, something very old and very powerful is already halfway through." "Can we stop it?" Claire asked, desperation lacing her voice. Marla exhaled deeply. "Stopping it won't be easy. This entity has already latched onto you," she said, turning her piercing gaze to Jenna. "And if it fully takes over, it won't just destroy you. It will use you as a vessel to wreak havoc." Jenna felt her knees weaken. "What do I do?" Marla pulled a heavy, leather-bound book from her shelf and flipped through its yellowed pages. "We'll need to perform a ritual to sever the connection, but it's risky. If the entity senses what we're doing, it will fight back, and if we fail, it will be unleashed completely." Jenna's throat tightened as she exchanged a look with Claire. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice trembling, but resolute. Marla nodded. "We'll need to act fast. The longer the mirror stays intact, the stronger its grip on you becomes." That night, armed with candles, chalk, and a vial of consecrated oil, the three women prepared the ritual in Jenna's bedroom. Marla drew a complex sigil on the floor around the mirror, muttering incantations under her breath. As the candles flickered, Jenna's reflection in the mirror shifted again. The ember-eyed man smirked, his voice echoing through the room. "You can't get rid of me, Jenna. I'm already a part of you." The sigil began to glow, and the air grew heavy. Jenna felt a searing pain in her chest as the figure in the mirror reached toward her, his hand pressing against the glass as if to break through. "Hold her," Marla shouted, but before anyone could react, the mirror cracked further, and a deafening roar filled the room. The room trembled as the mirror began to pulse with an unnatural glow, the cracks spidering outward like a web ready to collapse. The ember-eyed figure pressed harder against the glass, his malevolent grin widening as he reached out for Jenna. Marla's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Jenna, focus. He feeds on your fear. You have to resist him." "I'm trying," Jenna screamed, clutching her chest as the searing pain intensified. It felt as if her soul was being tugged toward the mirror, her vision blurring as dark whispers filled her mind. Claire grabbed Jenna's shoulders, shaking her. "Jenna, listen to me. You're stronger than this. Don't let him win." The figure in the mirror chuckled darkly, his voice oozing malice. "They don't understand, do they? You belong to me, Jenna. You invited me in. You chose this." Jenna's knees buckled and she fell to the floor, her body racked with shivers. The room seemed to warp around her, the edges of reality bending as the entity's power grew. Marla lit the final candle and held the vial of consecrated oil high, chanting words in a language Jenna couldn't understand. "Keep him distracted," Marla shouted, her voice strained as she drew another sigil in the air. Claire turned to the mirror, her fists clenched. "Hey you, leave her alone. She's not yours." The figure's attention shifted to Claire, his ember eyes narrowing. "You're brave for someone so fragile," he hissed. "Shall I show you how easily I can break you?" The mist began to pour from the mirror again, snaking toward Claire. She stumbled back, her face pale, but she stood her ground. "You won't win," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "We won't let you." Marla completed the final stroke of the glowing sigil and turned to Jenna. "Now, Jenna, you have to speak the incantation. Only you can sever the bond." Jenna struggled to her feet, her heart pounding. The words Marla had taught her swirled in her mind, their foreign syllables heavy on her tongue. She stared at the mirror, the figure now fully formed, his hand pressing against the glass as if ready to shatter it. "You can't fight me," the figure sneered. "You're mine." Jenna clenched her fists, tears streaming down her face. "You're wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm taking my life back." She began to recite the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. The sigil on the floor blazed with light, and the mist recoiled as if burned. The figure roared, his hand retreating from the glass as cracks spread rapidly across the mirror's surface. "No," he bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. "You can't." The final word of the incantation left Jenna's lips, and the mirror exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Shards of glass rained down, and the ember-eyed figure was sucked back into the void with a deafening scream. When the light faded, the room was silent. The mirror was gone, its frame empty and scorched. Jenna collapsed to the floor, her chest heaving as relief and exhaustion washed over her. Claire rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did it, Jenna. It's over." Marla knelt beside them, her expression somber. "The mirror is destroyed, but you must be vigilant. Entities like that don't disappear entirely. They linger, waiting for another door to open." Jenna nodded weakly, her resolve steeling. "I'll never make that mistake again." As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Jenna felt a weight lift from her chest. The battle was over, but she knew the scars would reminder of the price she paid to reclaim her soul.